big wave on November the 1st, 2011. Can you describe what that wave looked like as it was coming towards you?
Well, we looked out at the horizon, and it just kind of stood up so tall that it kind of went black, and we tried to go for the first, second one, and then we saw the second one, and it was just like, here it is.
On a clear winter's day in 2011, off the coast of a small fishing town in Portugal, Garrett McNamara had the ride of his life. A wave nearly 80 feet high, a giant wall of water that weighs hundreds of thousands of tons, was coming directly for the Hawaiian surfer. Most people would run or swim away. Garrett climbed onto his surfboard. There's a video of the whole thing online. You see a tiny figure crest over the top of this liquid avalanche and begin racing to the bottom. At one point, as the wave barrels over, Garrett appears to be submerged in white water, only to emerge, standing at the end.
And I'm coming down, and it's nice and choppy, bumpy, but really small. Like, usually it's like boom, 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 and it's like smooth. And as I get to the bottom, I was like, okay, this is a pretty serious wave.
Hey, beautiful, clean, smooth. It's a really beautiful ride. It felt kind of big, but the only time it felt big is when I was kicking out and the white water hit me, and it felt like a ton of bricks. And it was just a teeny little white water.
Garrett broke a world record that day for the biggest wave ever surfed. A picture of his stomach-dropping feet went viral, and it put the sleepy small town of Nazaré in Portugal, where it happened, on the map as one of the world's premier big wave surfing destinations. Garrett and his partner, Nicole Macias, spent months there assembling a local team to map and understand the waves and training jet ski drivers to rescue surfers if they fell. Finally, with all the preparations in place, they invited pro surfers from around the world to come and surf it. Nicole was put on safety watch. She and Garrett spoke to Outlook's Emily Webb.
So November the 1st, 2011, you were on safety/wave spotting.
Yes.
Do you remember seeing the wave for the first time?
Yes, and it was substantially bigger than any wave we had seen that day or seen yet in Nazaré.
What did you see? Tell me about it from your perspective, Nicole, being up on the cliff.
Well, we had a really long day the day before, so I honestly didn't want to be up there, and I was just hoping they would go in soon because I was tired and it's cold. And while they were doing this, I saw the set coming, and it was huge. So I was like, you gotta hurry up. There's a huge set coming. Like, get it together. And, you know, it's just, the ocean just rises up, and you see the set coming, which has 3 or 4 swells. And usually, you know, you can't really tell the difference of, like, the height difference isn't that great, so you can't really say which one's going to end up being bigger. But in this instance, there was that one wave that you could tell was much larger than all the others.
The wave was big, 78 foot high. That's the equivalent of a 7-story building coming at you. Garrett, what is the emotion when it comes towards you?
It's just exciting. It's like, get me on that thing now.
Nicole, watching your loved one do that, I mean, I imagine it's a mix of exhilarating and also quite terrifying.
Never really been terrified. For some reason, I just think Garrett is 1,000% capable. It's what he was meant to do. It's where he belongs.
Today, thanks to Garrett and Nicole, Nazaré is one of the most important destinations for big wave surfing on the planet. If you see a headline about a surfing record being broken, it probably happened there. There's an amazing picture of Garrett being dwarfed by that gigantic wave on the BBC Outlook website. You're listening to the best of this week's Outlook stories with me, Aussie Freaks. Next up, another kind of adrenaline rush. a dramatic raid to rescue 2 parrot chicks. Juan Villalba Macias is a Uruguayan naturalist and animal rescuer. In the 1980s, he became the director of the World Wildlife Fund South American office. He was in charge of combating illegal animal and plant trafficking, an industry estimated to be worth up to $23 billion a year globally. In 1987, Juan was about to embark on his most risky mission yet, to save 2 little bluebirds. Outlook's Luis Morris went to meet him at his nature reserve in the Uruguayan countryside.
I received information that in Paraguay there was a trafficker who was selling 2 Spix macaws. There were now only 3 specimens left in the wild in the whole of Brazil, and 2 of those had just had their chicks that the trafficker had stolen right from the nest and had taken them to Paraguay.
So they were babies, they were really young parrots.
Yes. They were very small. Animal trafficking is extremely destructive. Often only 1 of every 10 animals survive being trafficked. So I had that information that those would be the last 2 specimens that were born in the wild, and they were asking $80,000 for both of them.
So lots of money for 2 parrots.
Yes, and it was 1987. So today it would be even more money.
Bueno, y estaban casi vendidos a un médico suizo.
And they were about to be sold to a Swiss doctor.
Why is it that people with so much wealth are so determined to take an animal out of its natural environment and to keep it captive? Can you explain the psychology of these people? Why do they feel they need these living trophies?
Yo creo muchas veces.
I think that people with a lot of money see them as a luxury item, like a fancy car or a painting. So some people take it as a symbol of power to own.
Símbolo de poder.
But coming between a rich man and his trophy parrots wouldn't be easy. Paraguay at the time was still in the depths of a violent dictatorship, and the trafficker had friends in high places.
Entonces yo viajé a Asunción.
So I traveled to Asunción, the capital of Paraguay. I remember that we went to the Palace of Justice and found a judge who gave us a warrant to search the trafficker's house.
Llegamos con apoyo policial.
We arrived with the police. He was out, but his wife was there. At first, she wouldn't let us in, but she relented. I'd been told that the parrots were in a room on the 2nd floor. We went straight to that room, and as soon as we walked in, we saw a lady climbing out of the window with a suitcase. She was trying to climb over the roof to the house next door.
De hecho a otro.
She was literally jumping out of the window the moment you entered.
Sí, en ese momento.
Exactly. And right at that moment, I ran up and snatched the suitcase from her. And well, I did something that could have been catastrophic, because I opened the suitcase right then to check, and there were the 2 parrots.
Por suerte eran pequeños y todavía no volaban.
But luckily, they were small and couldn't fly yet. I mean, there was an open window right there.
We could have lost the last 2 born in the wild to Paraguay's skies, I suppose.
Sí. Fue un momento de esos que con los nervios.
Yes, I was nervous, so wanted to check that we definitely have found the parrots. Luckily, they remained calm. And I remember going back downstairs and seeing the wife of the trafficker, seeing the suitcase in my hand, and the cigarette she was smoking just fell right out of her mouth. She was so shocked. Imagine, she just saw $80,000 lost.
She knew the game was up.
And we left for the Brazilian embassy immediately.
They'd done it. The parrot chicks were safe in the Brazilian embassy. Juan stayed with them the whole time. The plan was to leave the very next day for Sao Paulo, Brazil. But after the raid on his home, the trafficker was soon onto them, and he wasn't someone you wanted on your tail.
Traficante tenía muchos contactos y mucha influencia.
The trafficker had a lot of influence in Paraguay. We knew that a counteroffensive was going to be unleashed to try to rescue them. Indeed, just a few hours later, we heard that the police were trying to track us down.
So wait, so the police initially had the support of the police to raid this house, and then all in the matter of hours they turned on you and they were trying to hunt you down to stop you leaving the country.
Es un poco loco, ¿no? Pero es así.
It's a bit crazy, isn't it? But that's how it was. Fortunately, we were safe inside the Brazilian embassy, and the next morning we traveled to Sao Paulo with the 2 Spix macaws.
How did you feel in those moments? Because, I mean, it sounds obviously scary enough that the police were after you, but this was in the context of a very violent dictatorship in Paraguay.
Sí, efectivamente era una dictadura sumamente cruel.
Yes, it was an extremely cruel dictatorship under Alfredo Stroessner, who ruled with an iron fist. It was incredibly dangerous because people were being disappeared all the time. And the trafficker, who was German, was linked to the Stroessner regime.
Le ganamos la partida porque los tomamos de sorpresa, ¿no?
We managed to take them by surprise, but if we hadn't, it would have been impossible to rescue the macaws.
So Juan and the Brazilian ambassador touched down in Sao Paulo, Brazil with their precious cargo, bringing the 2 Spix's macaws back to their home country. After this intense rescue mission, being pursued by the police, and you finally got to the safety of Brazil to leave these baby macaws behind. How did you feel saying goodbye to them?
La alegría de que...
There's the joy that you could do something to help an animal that's about to disappear from the world. Like I said before, it's one of those magical moments in life. I mean, wow.
Juan has continued to work to conserve the Spix's macaw, but sadly, by 2001, the only remaining Spix's macaw left in the wild had disappeared and was presumed dead. Their story did, however, catch the attention of Hollywood and inspired the film Rio.
He's about to discover how rare he really is. Blue is the last male of his kind.
I have a kind?
The only other blue macaw is in Rio de Janeiro.
Brazil?
Yo la he visto unas cuantas veces y me resulta muy atractiva.
I've seen it quite a few times and enjoy it. It does, of course, differ a bit from reality, but I think the most important thing is that it's reaching a lot of people, children especially, with the message that we are all responsible for our environment and we should protect it.
In 2000, Juan was given the opportunity of a lifetime to create a nature reserve where native Uruguayan species can be conserved. He's lived on the reserve ever since with his family. He was speaking to Luis Morris. From Uruguay, we're crossing the border to Argentina to meet Sofia Gatica. If she'd had a choice in the matter, Sofia would have loved to have remained a housewife, quietly raising her family on the outskirts of the city of Cordoba. It was a simple life, but she loved it, and she thought her neighborhood of Ituzaingó was the perfect place to bring up her kids, next to some lush green fields where they could play. But life took a turn for her, and Sofia was forced to come face to face with something shocking, something that was eating away at her community from the inside. She'd come to a crossroads, and she'd have to decide whether to stay quiet or speak up and fight. Sofia's story starts with a tragedy. In the late 1990s, her 3-day-old daughter died from a mystery kidney condition. Sofia was bereft. She could barely leave her house for weeks, and she just couldn't process what had happened, why her daughter had died. But slowly, she began to notice something strange going on. A reporter in Argentina, Clayton Kahn, went to meet her.
Y eso me hizo pensar un poquito. De ahí se pasamos una maestra.
It was around the same time that I began to see another neighbor, a teacher, walked by the house every day wearing a white handkerchief. And one day I stopped her and I asked her, "Why do you wear that thing in your head?" And she told me that she had cancer. And that's when it hit me.
Sophia wondered if her newborn's unusual death and the teacher's cancer was not a coincidence, but rather an indication of a bleak pattern in Ituzaingó.
Porque yo veía muchas mamás que pasan.
I started to see so many mothers pass by the house wearing those handkerchiefs, and their children wearing surgical masks. I knew those mothers were bold because of a reaction to cancer treatments and chemotherapy, and their children with their masks were also taking chemo. So when I saw this pattern, I started going to every house on the block, asking each neighbor how many people in their family were ill and what kind of illnesses they had.
Y cuando iba al frente, por ejemplo, Susana me dice, pero a vos, Sofía, se te murió tu...
The woman who lived across the street said she lost her child too. Just on our block alone, we discovered that 5 or 6 children had died of different illnesses.
The grim reality Sophia began to perceive all around her filled her with raw emotion that sparked a fire. She became unshakably determined to find out why so many people in Ituzaingó were ill and dying. So she expanded her door knocking to almost every block in the neighborhood.
And as I went to visit those families, they began to join me, and soon we formed a group of mothers.
Empezó a formar el grupo de madres.
They would become known as the Mothers of Ituzaingó. They would meet up at each other's houses, gather information on their illnesses, and plan actions to identify what was making them sick, to stop it, and hold those responsible accountable. They pondered a range of theories. Could it have been chemicals from the electrical grid, lead piping, industrial pollution, or the monoculture practices from the lush green soybean fields?
En el barrio había una sola computadora.
In the neighborhood, there was only one computer. When I began carrying out my survey, I met a woman whose name is Beatriz. She heard that I was going around doing this and said that she would help me, that I could use her computer to compile all the data. And that's when we mapped out our findings of who was sick with what and where.
Y ponerlos en un mapa y ubicarlos.
This map would be a turning point for the women.
Y lo voy a poner así. Bueno, este es el mapa de Barrio Ituzaingó.
This is the original map here, which we, the mothers of Ituzaingó, made some 23 years ago.
And can you just describe the map a little bit? What are we looking at here?
Si ustedes ven, tenemos la única entrada acá por la Ruta 9.
You can see here on the map the neighborhood. You can see soybean fields here to the north, east and south of Ituzaingó. The red circles indicate someone who had cancer, and the red and black circles represent someone who died of their illness. Look, here is where I used to live on this main street. Here, look, I lived just about 50 meters from the soybean fields.
Fíjate, estoy a 50 metros del campo de soja.
Through mapping out their survey and seeing the visual representation of those ill in the community, the mothers of Ituzaingó were astonished at what they discovered. They calculated that the cancer rate in their neighborhood was 41 times higher than the national average.
No te das cuenta, nosotros estábamos viviendo en un barrio contaminado.
You know, at first, you just don't realize the dimension of the problem. We were living in a polluted neighborhood with a ton of people sick with cancer, and we just didn't realize what was going on. We didn't realize.
Porque no te das cuenta.
The map clearly supported a growing suspicion that the potential